They say money makes the world go round. But for Arthur Sterling, a man worth $6 billion, his world stopped spinning the day his daughter was born in total silence. He had the best doctors in Switzerland, the finest surgeons in New York, and spiritual healers in Peru. They all said the same thing: impossible. But they were looking in the wrong places. The cure wasn't in a high-tech lab or a sterile hospital room. It was in the apron pocket of a broke, exhausted waitress named Beatrice, standing in a diner that smelled like grease and regret. And what she pulled out? It didn't just give a little girl her hearing. It exposed a 20-year-old crime that would tear the Sterling empire apart. The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. For Arthur Sterling, standing by the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse overlooking the Space Needle, the rain was just another noise he couldn't share with the one person who mattered. "Daddy?" Arthur turned. Standing in the doorway was Ivy. She was 6 years old, wearing a velvet dress that cost more than most people's cars. She held a stuffed rabbit by the ear. She didn't say "Daddy" with her voice. She signed it. A tap of the thumb against the forehead. Arthur forced a smile, his heart doing that familiar, painful stutter. He signed back. "Are you hungry, my love?" Ivy shook her head. She looked at the grand piano in the corner of the room, a Steinway that sat untouched, gathering dust. Arthur followed her gaze and felt the bitterness rise in his throat like bile. He had bought that piano the day his wife, Vivian, announced she was pregnant. He had imagined a house filled with music. Instead, Vivian had died in childbirth, and Ivy had been born into a world of absolute, impenetrable silence. "Mr. Sterling," a voice cut through the room. It was Dr. Vance Thorne. He wasn't just a doctor. He was the head of Sterling Biotech, the division Arthur had poured billions into solely to fix Ivy's hearing. Thorne was sharp, angular, and smelled of expensive cologne and antiseptic. "The prototype failed, Arthur," Thorne said, not bothering to lower his voice because Ivy couldn't hear him anyway. "The auditory nerve is completely atrophied. There is no stimulation. It's a dead end. Again." Arthur's hands clenched into fists. "I don't pay you for dead ends, Vance. I pay you for miracles." "Miracles are for priests, Arthur. I'm a scientist. The nerve is dead. She will never hear. You need to accept that and stop throwing good money after bad." Arthur walked over to Ivy, picking her up. She vibrated with a silent giggle, feeling the rumble of his chest, but she would never know the sound of his laugh. "I will never accept it," Arthur whispered into her hair. He set her down. "Get the car ready, Vance. We're going out." "Out? In this weather? To where?" "Somewhere she can feel something," Arthur snapped. "The vibration of the city. I don't know. Just get me out of this mausoleum." 5 miles away, in a part of town where the street lights flickered and the potholes threatened to swallow tires whole, Beatrice B. Carson was trying to scrape gum off the bottom of table 4. "B! Order up on 6! Stop daydreaming!" yelled the manager, a greasy man named Rick, who thought yelling was a leadership style. "I'm coming, Rick. Hold your horses," B muttered, wiping her hands on her stained apron. B was 28, but looked 35. Life had a way of aging you when you worked double shifts at the Salty Spoon to pay off debts that weren't yours. Her father, a brilliant but troubled horologist, watchmaker, had died 2 years ago, leaving her nothing but a mountain of gambling debt and a box of junk he swore was valuable. She grabbed the plate of lukewarm fries and a burger. She was tired, bone tired, the kind of tired where your soul feels heavy. "Hey, sweetheart, coffee's cold," a trucker grumbled as she passed. "I'll heat it up, hun," she said mechanically. She walked back to the counter, her hand brushing against the pocket of her apron. She felt the cold metal of the object she always carried. It was the last thing her father had given her before the heart attack, a strange, silver device, no bigger than a pocket watch, with intricate engravings and a dial that didn't seem to correspond to time. "Keep it close, Bee," he had rasped, clutching her hand. "They stole the big one, but this is the key. Don't let the silence take it." She never knew what he meant. She just knew it was the only piece of him she had left. She didn't sell it, even when the rent was late. The bell above the diner door jingled violently as a gust of wind blew it open. The diner went quiet. It wasn't usual for men in $3,000 Italian suits to walk into the Salty Spoon. Arthur Sterling entered first, holding the hand of a little girl who looked like a porcelain doll. Behind them trailed Dr. Vance Thorne, looking at the linoleum floor with undisguised disgust. "This is where you wanted to go?" Thorne sneered. "Arthur, this place is a health code violation waiting to happen." "It's real," Arthur said, his voice flat. "Ivy likes the neon lights, the vibration of the jukebox. It stimulates her." They sat at a booth near the window. Bee watched them. She knew who Arthur Sterling was. Everyone did. The man who owned half the city. The man whose tragedy was tabloid fodder. She took a deep breath, smoothed her apron, and walked over. "Welcome to the Salty Spoon," she said, putting on her best customer service smile. "What can I get for you folks?" Arthur didn't look up from the menu. "Coffee. Black. Hot chocolate for the girl, and whatever passes for a salad here for him." He gestured to Thorne. Ivy was looking around with wide eyes. She saw the jukebox flashing in the corner. She slid out of the booth and ran toward it, placing her small hands on the vibrating glass. "Ivy!" Arthur stood up, panic flashing in his eyes. "She's fine, Arthur," Thorne sighed. "Let her play." Bee watched the girl. She noticed the lack of reaction when the door chimed again. She noticed how the girl didn't startle when a waitress dropped a tray of silverware nearby. "She's deaf," Bee realized. Bee walked over to the jukebox to check on the girl. Ivy was pressing her cheek against the glass, closing her eyes, trying to feel the bass of the old rock song playing. Bee felt a strange heat in her pocket. The device. It was getting warm. That had never happened before. The device in Bee's pocket wasn't just warm, it was vibrating. A low hum that traveled up her hip and into her fingertips. Bee ignored it for a moment, kneeling down next to Ivy. She smiled and waved to get the girl's attention. Ivy opened her eyes. They were a startling shade of green, filled with a deep, ancient sadness. Bee signed. "Do you like the music?" Arthur, who had been watching like a hawk, froze. He strode over, his expensive shoes clicking on the cheap tile. "You know ASL?" Bee looked up, surprised. "A little. My dad. He had trouble hearing towards the end. Taught me the basics." Arthur's face softened, just a fraction. "She can't hear the music. She just feels the bass." "It's better than nothing," Bee said softly. Suddenly the device in her pocket gave a sharp jolt, almost like an electric shock. Bee gasped and jumped back. "You okay?" Arthur asked, stepping closer. Yeah, static shock," Bee lied. But it wasn't static. The device was reacting, and it was reacting to Ivy. Back at the table, Dr. Thorne was watching the interaction with narrowed eyes. He didn't like unknowns. He didn't like waitresses who signed. And he certainly didn't like the way Arthur looked at her, with something other than his usual detached grief. "Arthur, sit down," Thorne called out. "The girl is dirtying her dress." Arthur ignored him. "What's your name?" he asked Bee. "Beatrice. Bee. I'm Arthur. This is Ivy." "I know who you are, Mr. Sterling," Bee said. She hesitated. The heat in her pocket was becoming unbearable. It felt like the device was trying to jump out. "Mr. Sterling, this might sound crazy, but—" Crash! A busboy slipped near the kitchen, sending a tower of plates shattering to the ground. The noise was deafening. Every patron in the diner jumped. Arthur flinched. Thorne covered his ears. But Ivy? Ivy didn't even blink. She kept her hand on the jukebox. The device in Bee's pocket let out a high-pitched whine that only she seemed to hear. It was painful, a drilling sound in her molars. She reached into her apron, desperate to stop the heat, and pulled it out. It was a silver disc, intricately carved with gears and copper wiring, visible through a small glass pane. It looked like steampunk jewelry, but far more advanced. As soon as it was in the open air, the dial on the front spun wildly. Dr. Vance Thorne stood up so fast, he knocked over his water. "Where did you get that?" His voice wasn't bored anymore. It was terrified. Bee looked at the object, then at Thorne. "It was my father's." "Put it away," Thorne commanded, stepping forward menacingly. "It's dangerous. It's radioactive waste or something. Put it away." "Back off, Vance," Arthur said, stepping between the doctor and the waitress. He looked at the device in Bee's hand. "What is that?" I don't know," Bee stammered. "My dad was a watchmaker. He called it a resonance key. He said it was for—" She looked at Ivy. The dial was pointing directly at the little girl. On the device, a tiny red light turned green. Ivy pulled her hand away from the jukebox. She frowned. She reached up and touched her left ear, then her right. She turned around. Arthur held his breath. "Ivy," he whispered. Ivy didn't react. "She can't hear you, Arthur," Thorne said quickly, sweat beading on his forehead. "Let's go. This woman is crazy, pulling out junk toys. We're leaving." Thorne grabbed Ivy's arm roughly to pull her toward the door. Ivy cried out, a guttural, startled sound. Bee felt a surge of anger. She didn't think. She just acted. She twisted the outer ring of the silver device. Her father had shown her this once, years ago. Right for amplification, left for dampening. She cranked it all the way to the right. The device emitted a pulse. It wasn't a sound. It was a wave of pressure that rippled through the diner. The ketchup bottles rattled. The windows shook. And Ivy covered her ears and screamed. "Make it stop!" the little girl shrieked. The diner went dead silent. Arthur fell to his knees. He looked at his daughter, who was currently crying and clutching her ears. "Ivy," he choked out. Did you just speak?" Ivy looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "Daddy? It's too loud. The lights. They make a humming noise. It hurts." Arthur Sterling, the man of iron and steel, began to weep. He crawled forward and wrapped his arms around her. I'm sorry. Bee, turn it down. Please." Bee dialed the device back to the center. The pressure lifted. Ivy stopped screaming, but she was still sobbing, clinging to her father. "She heard me," Arthur whispered, looking up at Bee with eyes wide with shock and reverence. "She heard the lights. She heard me." Thorne was backing away toward the door, his face pale as a sheet. "That's impossible. That's a trick. Ventriloquism." "She's been deaf since birth, Vance," Arthur roared, standing up, his protective instinct flaring. "You told me her nerves were dead. You told me there was nothing left." Arthur turned to Bee. "What is that thing? Who are you?" Bee looked down at the silver disc. It was cooling down now. "My father was Elias Carson. Does that name mean anything to you?" Arthur shook his head, but Thorne stopped dead in his tracks near the exit. "Elias Carson," Thorne muttered. "The lunatic of Geneva." "He wasn't a lunatic," Bee said, her voice shaking but firm. "He was a genius, and he told me that people stole his work. He told me they stole the big one. And looking at your daughter, Mr. Sterling—" Bee pointed the device at Thorne. "I think I know who stole it." Thorne bolted. "Stop him!" Arthur shouted to his security detail, waiting outside. But the drama was far from over. Because as Ivy looked up at Bee, her eyes wide with the sudden, terrifying, beautiful influx of sound, she pointed at the silver device. "It sings," Ivy whispered. "The silver circle. It sings like Mommy." Arthur froze. "What?" "Mommy used to sing that song," Ivy said. her words slurred from lack of use, but unmistakable. In my dreams. The box. It sounds like Mummy. Arthur looked at the device in Bee's hand. He looked at the intricate carvings, and for the first time, he recognized the crest etched into the back of the metal. It wasn't a watchmaker's mark. It was the Sterling family crest. "That's not just a hearing aid," Arthur whispered, the horror dawning on him. "That's my wife's locket, the one she was wearing when she died." Bee looked at the device, then at Arthur. "My father didn't steal this. He found it. In the trash behind your research lab, 15 years ago." The diner was silent again, but this time the air was thick with the promise of vengeance. "We need to go," Arthur said, his voice cold as ice. "Bee, you're coming with us. Bring the key." "Where are we going?" Bee asked, untying her apron. "To Sterling Biotech," Arthur said, picking up his daughter, who was now marveling at the sound of her own breathing. "To find out why my head of research tried to keep my daughter deaf, and how he killed my wife." The interior of Arthur Sterling's Rolls-Royce Phantom was designed to be a sanctuary of silence. Double-paned acoustic glass, noise-cancelling chassis technology, thick wool carpets. For the first time in 6 years, Arthur hated the silence. He wanted to hear his daughter breathing. Ivy sat in the middle seat, sandwiched between Arthur and Beatrice. The silver device, the resonance key, sat in Bee's lap, glowing faintly. Every time the car went over a bump, Ivy gasped, her eyes darting around. "It's okay, baby," Arthur soothed, reaching for her hand. "It's just the tires." Ivy looked at his lips, then at his eyes. She squeezed his hand. "Tires," she repeated, testing the word. Her voice was raspy, unused, but the pitch was perfect. Arthur looked at Bee. The intensity in his gaze made Bee want to shrink into the leather upholstery. "Tell me about Elias," Arthur commanded. It wasn't a request. Bee swallowed hard. He was a watchmaker on 4th Street. But he was obsessed with sound. He used to say that time and sound were the same thing, just vibrations of the universe. He lost his shop about 15 years ago. Said a big company sued him for patent infringement. They took everything. His designs, his prototypes. He barely avoided jail. "Sterling Biotech sued him?" Arthur asked, his knuckles white. He never said the name. He was too scared. He just said, "the giants." He spent the last decade working out of our garage, fixing clocks and tinkering with that. She pointed to the device. He called it the ghost frequency. He said there were sounds in the world that people weren't meant to hear, and sounds that could heal broken nerves. Arthur looked out the window at the rain-slicked streets of Seattle passing by. 15 years ago. That was when I hired Vance Thorne. I brought him in to lead a new division. Neuroacoustics. He claimed he had a breakthrough in curing congenital deafness. "And instead," Bee whispered, "he ruined a watchmaker and stole his work." "It's worse than that," Arthur said grimly. "If this device is my wife's locket, it means Thorne was working with Vivian, without me knowing." The car slowed as they approached the towering glass structure of Sterling Biotech. It was a fortress of steel and blue light, piercing the night sky. Usually, the sight filled Arthur with pride. Tonight, it looked like a prison. "Driver, take us to the private underground entrance," Arthur ordered. "Yes, sir." The car descended into the subterranean garage. Arthur helped Ivy out. She covered her ears as the heavy garage door slammed shut with a metallic clang. Bee quickly adjusted the dial on the key, dampening the sound. Ivy relaxed instantly. "It's a remote control for her brain," Arthur marveled, terrifyingly fascinated. "It doesn't just amplify sound, it modulates how she processes it." They approached the private elevator. Arthur placed his palm on the scanner. "Beep, beep, access denied," Arthur frowned. He wiped his hand and tried again. "Beep, beep, access denied." Lockdown protocol initiated. "He knows we're here," Arthur growled. "Thorn, he's cut my access." "Can we use the stairs?" Bea asked. "The stairwells are magnetic locked. Only security can open them during a lockdown." Arthur kicked the steel doors in frustration. "I built this place to be impenetrable. I never thought I'd be on the outside." Bea looked at the scanner, then at the device in her hand. A memory surfaced. Her father, late at night, drunk on cheap whiskey, holding the device up to the microwave to stop the beeping. "It speaks their language, Bea. It speaks to the machines." "Let me try," Bea said. "Don't be ridiculous," Arthur snapped. "That's a medical device, not a hacking tool. Just let me try." Bea stepped up to the bioscanner. She held the resonance key up to the sensor. The device hummed, the copper gears inside spinning rapidly. She turned the dial to the left, then sharply to the right. The device emitted a series of clicks, not random, but rhythmic, like a code. "Cheer up." The scanner light turned green. "Welcome, Administrator 0. The elevator doors slid open. Arthur stared at Bea with his mouth slightly open. "Administrator 0? That shouldn't exist. That's a developer override code." "My dad didn't just find this in the trash," Bea realized, a chill running down her spine. "He built the lock, and he kept the key." They stepped into the elevator. Arthur pressed the button for the top floor, Thorn's office. But Bea's hand stopped him. "No," she said. The device was vibrating again, pulling her hand downward. "The heat. It's pulling down. Whatever this thing is connected to, it's not in the penthouse." "The labs are on floors 10 through 20, Arthur said. "Lower," Bea said. "It wants to go lower." Arthur looked at the control panel. "There's only the basement. Maintenance and storage. Press it." Arthur hesitated, then pressed B. The elevator plummeted. As they descended, the atmosphere in the small metal box shifted. Ivy was calm, holding the hem of Bea's apron. For a waitress who had spent her morning scrubbing grease, Bea felt strangely at home in this high-tech espionage. It felt like she was finally stepping into the life her father had been too afraid to live. The doors opened to a dark corridor. It didn't look like storage. The air was sterile, cold, and smelled of ozone. "This isn't on the blueprints," Arthur whispered. They walked down the hallway. To their left and right were glass observation rooms. They were empty, but the equipment inside was still running. Oscilloscopes, frequency generators, massive speakers. "What is this place?" Bea asked. "This is level B," Arthur said, his voice shaking. "I thought this was just the foundation. I didn't pay for this." "Someone did," Bea said. At the end of the hall was a massive steel door. It had no handle, only a circular indentation in the center. An indentation exactly the size of the resonance key. Arthur looked at Bea. "Do it." Bea placed the silver device into the door. It clicked into place with a satisfying thud. The gears on the device aligned with unseen gears inside the door. The heavy steel groaned and began to rotate. The door opened, and the sound hit them. It wasn't a noise. It was a pressure, a deep, thrumming vibration that rattled their teeth and made their vision blur. Ivy let out a silent scream, clutching her head. Bea grabbed the key from the door slot. The door stayed open, and frantically dialed it to dampen. The pressure subsided for them, creating a bubble of silence around the three of them. "Stay close to me," Bea shouted over the hum that only she could feel now. They stepped inside. The room was a cavern, and in the center of the room, suspended in a tank of clear liquid, was a suit. Not a diving suit, not a space suit. It looked like a suit made of pure copper mesh and fiber optics, and standing at the console, typing furiously, was Dr. Vance Thorn. "You shouldn't have come, Arthur," Thorn said, his voice amplified by the room's acoustics. He didn't turn around. "You really shouldn't have come." "Turn it off, Vance," Arthur shouted, his voice echoing strangely in the vast acoustic chamber. Whatever this is, shut it down. Thorne finally turned. He looked manic. His tie was undone, his hair dishevelled. He held a pistol in one hand, but he didn't aim it at Arthur. He aimed it at the tank containing the copper suit. "Shut it down?" Thorne laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "I'm trying to save it. I'm trying to upload the data before you ruin 20 years of work." 20 years. Arthur stepped forward, shielding Ivy and Bee. "We've only been working together for 15. "You think this started with you?" Thorne sneered. "You were just the wallet, Arthur. The bank account. This started with her." He pointed a shaking finger at the large screen above the console. He hit a button. A video file began to play. The image was grainy, dated. It showed a laboratory, but not this high-tech dungeon. It looked like a cluttered workshop. Clocks covered the walls. A woman sat at a workbench. She was beautiful, with cascading dark hair and eyes that matched Ivy's. She was laughing. "Vivian!" Arthur choked out. Next to her stood a man with wild grey hair and thick glasses, adjusting a complex piece of machinery. "Dad," Bee whispered. On the screen, Vivian spoke. "Log date, October 14th, 1999. Elias thinks we've cracked it. The resonance stabilization is holding. If this works, we can cure not just hearing loss, but nerve damage. We can use sound to knit bone, to heal tissue." Elias Carson leaned into the frame, grinning. "It's not just healing, Viv. It's communication. Direct neural interface. No more misunderstandings. Pure thought transfer through resonance. We're going to change the world." The video cut to static. Then a new clip started. Vivian looked tired, pale. She was pregnant, heavily so. Log date, June 20th. "Vance is pushing for the military application again," Vivian said, her voice trembling. "He says the frequency can be inverted. Instead of healing nerves, it can liquefy them. He calls it the silent cannon." I told him no. Elias is hiding the prototype. We're going to shut the project down. I'm scared, Arthur. If you find this, I'm so sorry I didn't tell you. I wanted to protect you from them. The screen went black. Arthur stood frozen, the weight of the revelation crushing him. His wife hadn't just been a socialite philanthropist. She had been a scientist, a pioneer, and she had died protecting a secret. She was brilliant, Thorne spat. But she was weak. She wanted to heal people. Imagine. We had the power to create the ultimate weapon, a sound that could kill an army without firing a bullet, and she wanted to fix broken legs. "So you killed her," Arthur said, his voice low and dangerous. "I didn't kill her," Thorne scoffed. "I induced labor. I needed the child." Bee gasped. "Ivy?" "The baby was exposed to the resonance waves in the womb," Thorne explained, his eyes gleaming with madness. "Vivian was using the prototype on herself to soothe back pain, not realizing the frequency was altering the fetus's development. Ivy isn't deaf, Arthur. She never was." Thorne tapped the glass of the tank. "Ivy is a receiver. Her auditory nerves are hypersensitive. She hears everything. The electricity in the walls, the heartbeat of a fly, the tectonic plates shifting miles rapidly. If she didn't have that mental block, if she wasn't deaf, the noise of the world would drive her insane. Her brain shut down her hearing as a defense mechanism to keep her from dying of shock." Arthur looked down at his daughter. Ivy was staring at the tank, mesmerized. "That's why the device works," Bee realized aloud. "It doesn't make her hear. It filters. It blocks out the chaos so she can focus on the signal." "Precisely, Waitress," Thorne mocked. "Your father built the filter. The key. He stole it and ran away when Vivian died. I've been looking for that damn locket for 6 years. And now—" Thorne raised the gun, pointing it directly at Bee. "You brought it to me. Give me the key," Thorne commanded. "No," Bee said, clutching it tighter. "I will shoot the billionaire," Thorne said calmly. "Then the girl. Then I'll take it from your corpse." Arthur tensed, ready to lunge, but they were 20 feet away. He wouldn't make it. "Bee," Arthur said softly. "Give it to him." "No," Bee said again. She looked at the device, the dial, the gears. She remembered the diner. She remembered the exploding windows. She looked at Ivy. Ivy was watching her. Bee signed a single word against her leg, hoping Ivy was watching. "Cover." Ivy understood. She immediately clamped her hands over her ears and curled into a ball on the floor. "I said give it to me," Thorne yelled, cocking the hammer of the pistol. "You want the sound?" Bee yelled back. "Take it all." She didn't hand it over. Instead, she twisted the outer ring of the resonance key, not to dampen, not to amplify. She twisted it past the safety stop, forcing the gear to grind against the metal casing until it snapped. She threw the device, not at Thorne, but into the center of the room, right under the massive suspended speakers. "What are you doing?" Thorne screamed. The device hit the floor. Because the safety was broken, the internal resonator began to feedback loop. It picked up the ambient hum of the room, amplified it, and projected it back. A high-pitched screech began to build. It started as a whine, then a scream, then a physical force. Thorne dropped the gun, clutching his ears. "Stop it! You'll bring the building down!" Arthur dove, covering Ivy with his body. Bee dropped to the floor, hands over her ears, screaming in pain as the pressure wave hit her. The glass of the observation rooms shattered. The liquid in the tank began to boil from the vibration. Thorne, closest to the console, fell to his knees. Blood began to trickle from his nose and ears. The silent cannon he had wanted to build was turning on him. The frequency was resonating with the calcium in his bones. "Turn it off!" he shrieked, crawling toward the exit. But the device was spinning wildly on the floor, glowing white-hot. The massive steel door they had entered through began to vibrate. The hinges screamed. "We have to go!" Arthur yelled, grabbing Ivy. He grabbed Bee by the arm and dragged her up. "Run!" They scrambled back into the hallway. The sound followed them, a physical monster chasing them down the corridor. Behind them, inside the lab, the frequency hit a critical pitch. The copper suit in the tank shattered, the console exploded, and the ceiling of Level B began to give way. They made it to the elevator just as a cloud of dust and debris billowed down the hall. Arthur slammed his palm on the scanner. "Emergency evacuation. Elevators offline." "Damn it!" Arthur roared. "The stairs!" Bea yelled. "The power is cut. The magnetic locks might be disengaged." They ran for the stairwell. Arthur kicked the door. It swung open. They scrambled up the concrete stairs, lungs burning. 1 flight. 2 flights. From below, a deep, earth-shaking rumble echoed as Level B collapsed in on itself, burying the lab, the prototype, and Dr. Vance Thorne under tons of concrete and steel. They burst out into the lobby of Sterling Biotech. The fire alarms were blaring. Sprinklers were raining down on them. Security guards were running toward them, confusion on their faces. "Mr. Sterling, we heard an explosion!" the head of security shouted. Arthur stood there, soaking wet, holding his daughter, with a waitress in a dirty apron beside him. He looked like a man who had been to hell and back. "Seal the building," Arthur commanded, his voice returning to its billionaire authority. "Nobody goes in. Nobody comes out. Call the police. And call my lawyers." He looked at Bee. She was leaning against the reception desk, gasping for air. Her pocket felt light. The key was gone. "You destroyed it," Arthur said. "The only thing that let her here." Bee looked at Ivy. The little girl was looking at the chaos, the flashing lights, the running people, the water dripping. She wasn't covering her ears. She was watching her father's lips. "I didn't destroy the cure, Arthur," Bee said, wiping soot from her face. "I destroyed the weapon." Arthur looked at Ivy. "Ivy? Can you hear me?" Ivy looked up. She frowned, concentrating. She pointed to the sprinkler above them. "Rain," she signed. Then she pointed to Arthur's chest. "Heart." She could still hear. "How?" Arthur breathed. The device was a stabilizer, B said. But maybe she doesn't need the machine anymore. Maybe she just needed to know that the noise wouldn't hurt her. Or maybe... B shrugged, a tired smile forming. Maybe the device did something to her in that last burst, a final adjustment. Arthur picked Ivy up and hugged her so tight her feet dangled. He looked at B over his daughter's shoulder. You saved her life. You saved my life. I was just returning a lost item, B said. Arthur shook his head. No, you're not going back to that diner, Beatrice. We have a lot to talk about, starting with your father's legacy. B looked out the glass doors at the real rain falling on the city. For the first time in years, the future didn't look like a long, dark tunnel. It sounded like music. But as the police sirens wailed in the distance, B knew the story wasn't over. Thorne was buried, yes. But Sterling Biotech had a board of directors, and people who invested in weapons didn't like losing their assets. She had destroyed the prototype. But the blueprints, surely Thorne wasn't the only one who had them. Mr. Sterling, B said, we need to get your wife's files, the ones Thorne didn't delete. Arthur nodded, his eyes hardening. We will. But first, let's get you a dry shirt, and maybe a better job. The sun rose over Seattle, but for Beatrice Carson, the world felt like it was still shrouded in the grey dust of the collapsed laboratory. She wasn't at the Salty Spoon anymore. She wasn't scraping gum off tables or dodging groping hands from drunken truck drivers. She was sitting in a chair that probably cost more than her childhood home inside the library of the Sterling estate. Arthur entered the room. He looked exhausted. He had traded his ruined suit for a cashmere sweater and dark slacks, but the tension in his shoulders remained. The lawyers are finally gone, Arthur said, rubbing his temples. And the FBI, and the NSA. The NSA? Bay asked, setting down her cup of tea. Her hands were still trembling slightly. When you blow up a secret underground lab containing illegal sonic weaponry, the government tends to get curious, Arthur said dryly. He walked over to the fireplace, where a fire crackled, providing a soothing white noise. They're calling it an industrial accident, a gas leak. Thorne is listed as missing. Missing? B stiffened. We saw the ceiling come down on him. They haven't found a body, Arthur said grimly. But nobody could have survived that. The concrete poured in like water. He's gone, B. Arthur sat opposite her. The more important question is, how are you? B looked down at her hands. I'm unemployed. I'm technically homeless since my landlord evicted me this morning for police activity at my apartment. And I just found out my father was a genius who invented a doomsday device. She let out a shaky laugh. I'm doing great. Arthur leaned forward. You're not homeless. You're staying here, and you're not unemployed. I can't take your charity, Mr. Sterling. It's not charity. It's a job offer. Arthur pulled a folder from the side table. Ivy. She's struggling. The device you destroyed, the key, it acted as a filter. Without it, the world is an assault on her senses. We have her in the soundproof wing right now, but she can't live in a padded room forever. She trusts you. You know sign language. You understand the madness of what we just saw. I need a governess, a guardian, someone who understands the ghost frequency legacy. B hesitated. I'm a waitress, Arthur. I didn't even finish college. You hacked a level 5 biometric lock with a pocket watch, Arthur countered. I think you're overqualified. The transition wasn't easy. The Sterling estate was a palace, but for Ivy, it was a minefield. The first week was brutal. Without the resonance key, Ivy had to wear industrial-grade noise-cancelling headphones 24 hours a day. Even then, she would sometimes curl up and scream, claiming she could hear the Wi-Fi or hear the electricity in the walls. B spent her days in the soundproof nursery, a room lined with acoustic foam and soft velvet. It's okay, B signed, sitting on the floor with Ivy. Focus on me. Focus on my hands. Ivy, pale and dark-eyed, watched B's hands. She took off the headphones for a second, then flinched. The lights are buzzing, like B's. We'll turn them off, B signed. She switched the room to candlelight. Better? Ivy nodded. She crawled into B's lap. Where is the silver circle? The one that sings like Mummy? B's heart broke. It's gone, sweetie. It had to go away to stop the bad man. Can we make another one? The question hung in the air. That night, after Ivy had finally fallen asleep, B went down to the workshop Arthur had set up in the garage. It wasn't high-tech like the lab. It was tactile, analog. Arthur was there, staring at a schematic spread across a workbench. Can we? B asked from the doorway. Make another one? Arthur looked up. I have the best engineers in the world working on it, but they don't understand the core principle. Thorne destroyed the digital files. All we have is this. He pointed to a box. B recognized it. It was the box of junk from her apartment. Arthur had sent a team to retrieve her belongings before the landlord threw them out. B walked over and picked up a leather-bound notebook. Her father's handwriting scrawled across the pages. Equations, drawings of gears, and frantic ramblings about the hum. My father didn't use computers for his real work, B whispered, tracing the ink. He was paranoid. He wrote everything down. She flipped to the back of the book. There was a diagram. It looked like the resonance key, but more complex. Arthur? She said. Look at this. Arthur squinted at the diagram. It looks like the internal mechanism. But what are these crystals? Quartz, B said, a memory unlocking. He used to make me collect quartz rocks when I was a kid. He said they hold vibration better than anything. The key wasn't electronic. It was acoustic. It used resonance crystals to cancel out the noise frequencies. Like an analog noise-cancelling headphone. Arthur looked at her, hope igniting in his eyes. If it's analog, we can build it. We don't need code, we need a jeweler. The piece didn't last long. 3 weeks later, Arthur was summoned to a board of directors meeting at Sterling Enterprises. He wanted B to come. Why me? B asked, adjusting the uncomfortable silk blouse she had been given. Because they're going to ask about the explosion. And about Thorne. You were the only witness who isn't a Sterling. The boardroom was on the 50th floor of the downtown tower. 12 men and women in suits that cost more than B's lifetime earnings sat around a mahogany table. At the head of the table sat Marcus Crane. He was the chairman of the board, a man in his 60s with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Arthur, Marcus said, his voice smooth. So good of you to join us. And this must be the nanny. This is Beatrice Carson, Arthur said, coldly, pulling out a chair for her. She is my consultant on the neuroacoustics matter. Ah, yes. The matter that incinerated $300 million of research and infrastructure, Marcus said, tapping a pen on the table. The shareholders are concerned, Arthur. Dr. Thorne is missing. The lab is destroyed, and rumors are circulating that you are developing military-grade tech off the books. Thorne was the one developing weapons, Arthur said firmly. I shut him down. Did you? Marcus leaned forward. Or did you just decide to keep the silent cannon for yourself? There is no cannon. Arthur slammed his hand on the table. It was a perversion of my wife's work. I destroyed it. That is a problem, Arthur, a woman down the table said. That research belonged to the company. You destroyed company property. That is grounds for a vote of no confidence. The room went silent. A coup. They were trying to take the company from him. You can't be serious, Arthur said. I own 51% of the voting stock. Actually, Marcus said, sliding a document across the table, due to the mental instability clause in your contract, triggered by your reckless endangerment of your daughter and the destruction of assets, the board has successfully filed a temporary injunction. Your voting rights are suspended pending a psychiatric evaluation. Arthur stood up, his face pale. You're stealing my company. We're saving it, Marcus said, and we're going to recover the research. We have teams excavating the sub-basement as we speak. If Thorne left so much as a hard drive intact, we will find it. Bea spoke up. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension. You won't find anything. Marcus looked at her, amused. And why is that, Miss Carson? Because Thorne wasn't the genius, Bea said, meeting his gaze. My father was. Thorne was just a thief. And unless you have a Carson on your payroll, you'll never understand the frequency. You'll just blow yourselves up. Marcus's smile faded. He looked at Bea with a new, predatory interest. Elias Carson's daughter, he mused. We wondered where you were. You know, your father owed us a great deal of money before he passed. My father owed gambling debts, Bea said. Is that what he told you? Marcus chuckled. No, my dear. Elias took a loan from a private equity firm, a shell company of mine, to build his prototype. He defaulted. Technically, his intellectual property belongs to me. Which means you belong to me. Arthur stepped in front of Bea. She belongs to no one. We're leaving. Go ahead, Marcus called out as they walked to the door. But Arthur, the injunction freezes your accounts, all of them. Hope you have some cash under the mattress. The credit cards didn't work. The gate codes to the estate were changed before they even got back. Arthur Sterling, worth $6 billion that morning, was locked out of his own life by noon. They moved fast, Arthur said, banging his fist on the steering wheel of the Rolls-Royce. They were parked on the side of the road, a mile from the estate entrance. Marcus has been planning this for years. He was waiting for a slip-up. We have Ivy, Bea said. That's what matters. Luckily, they had picked Ivy up from her therapy session on the way back. She was in the back seat, wearing her heavy headphones, colouring in a book. We can't go to the estate, Arthur said. They'll have security looking for us. They want you, Bea. They think you can recreate the weapon. Where do we go? Bea asked. I don't have an apartment anymore. Arthur looked in the rearview mirror at his daughter. There's one place, a safe house. Vivian bought it years ago under a fake name. Nobody knows about it. Not even the board. The safe house turned out to be a cabin in the Olympic Mountains, miles from civilization. It was rustic, dusty, and silent. No Wi-Fi, no cell service, just trees and rain. For a week, it was paradise. Arthur chopped wood. Bea cooked simple meals on a wood-burning stove. Ivy seemed happier here than in the penthouse. The lack of electronic signals meant the noise in her head was quieter. She started wearing her headphones less. One evening, as the rain hammered against the roof, Arthur sat with Bea on the porch. I never thought I'd say this, Arthur admitted, taking a sip of cheap wine Bea had bought at a gas station. But I don't miss the money. I miss the security, sure. But the rest? It was just noise. Bea looked at him. In the firelight, he didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a man. A father. We can't hide forever, Arthur, she said softly. Marcus won't stop. He wants the weapon. Let him dig in the rubble, Arthur said. He won't find anything. He doesn't need to dig, a small voice said. They turned. Ivy was standing in the doorway. She wasn't wearing her headphones. Her eyes were wide, staring at nothing. Ivy. Arthur moved to her. What is it? The birds, Ivy whispered. They stopped singing. It's night time, honey, Bea said. No, Ivy said, shaking her head. Not the feather birds, the metal birds. Suddenly, a low thrumming sound vibrated through the floorboards. It was felt before it was heard. Arthur ran to the edge of the porch. In the distance, coming over the tree line, were 3 black drones. Military grade. Silent rotors. They found us, Arthur cursed. How? We have no phones, no GPS. Ivy, Bea realized with horror. Ivy is the beacon, her biosignature. If she resonates with the frequency, maybe they can track her. Get inside, Arthur yelled. The drones didn't fire bullets. They dropped canisters. Hiss-S. Gas. Tear gas. They want to flush us out, Arthur coughed, slamming the cabin door and locking it. They want to take us alive. The basement, Bea shouted. There's a storm cellar. They grabbed Ivy and ran to the kitchen, pulling up the rug and opening the trap door. They tumbled down into the dark, damp earth, just as the windows of the cabin shattered above them. They huddled in the dark. Ivy was sobbing, her hands over her ears. It's too loud, she screamed. The hum! It's burning! Shh, shh, Bea rocked her. Arthur, we're trapped. Arthur was checking a hunting rifle he had found in the cabin. There's only one way out. The storm doors open to the outside. I'll draw their fire. You take Ivy and run into the woods. No, Bea grabbed his arm. That's suicide. These are mercenaries. I'm her father, Arthur said, his eyes fierce. It's my job to die for her. Daddy, no, Ivy cried. She reached out and touched Arthur's face. Then she stopped. Her expression changed. The fear vanished, replaced by a strange, intense focus. She turned her head, as if listening to a conversation nobody else could hear. He's talking, Ivy whispered. Who? The man in the machine. He says, target acquired. Prepare for extraction. Ivy closed her eyes. He says, System Override Protocol 7. What? Arthur frowned. She's hearing their comms, Bea gasped. Arthur, she's hearing the drone pilots. Ivy's brow furrowed. She looked like she was in pain. It hurts. But I can push back. Push back? Bea asked. Like the Silver Circle, Ivy said, through gritted teeth. Push the noise away. Ivy took a deep breath. She raised her hands toward the ceiling of the cellar. She opened her mouth and let out a sound. It wasn't a scream. It was a note. A perfect, high-pitched note that held steady. It was haunting, unnatural. Above them, the sound of the drones changed. The smooth hum became a jagged grinding. Ivy, stop! Arthur yelled. You'll hurt yourself. But Ivy didn't stop. The note went higher, beyond human hearing. Bea felt her teeth vibrate. Crash! A massive explosion shook the ground. Then another. Then a third. Silence. Ivy collapsed into Arthur's arms, unconscious. Ivy! Arthur shook her. She was breathing, but pale. Bea pushed open the storm doors carefully. She peeked out. The cabin was on fire, but in the clearing, the 3 drones lay in smoking ruins. They hadn't been shot down. They had fallen out of the sky. She shorted them out, Bea whispered, looking down at the little girl. She resonated with their guidance systems and overloaded them. Arthur stared at his daughter with a mix of awe and terror. Thorne was right. She is a weapon. No, Bea said, climbing out and helping Arthur lift Ivy. She's a protector. But now they know for sure what she can do. Marcus won't just want the tech anymore, Arthur. He'll want her. They ran into the woods, the light of the burning cabin casting long, dancing shadows behind them. They had no money, no allies, and they were being hunted by a corporation that owned half the city. But as they ran, Bea remembered something. The debt, she panted as they scrambled up a muddy hill. Marcus said he bought my father's debt. So? Arthur asked, carrying Ivy. So my father was meticulous, Bea said. If he took a loan, there would be a paper trail. If Marcus used a shell company to fund illegal weapons research, that's federal crime, RICO statutes, money laundering. We can't prove it, Arthur said. The files are gone. Not all of them, Bea said, a fierce determination rising in her. My father had a safe deposit box. He gave me the key years ago, but I never paid the fees, so I couldn't open it. I thought it was just more debt. Where is it? First National Bank, downtown Seattle. Arthur looked at her. We're fugitives, Bee. We can't just walk into a bank. We don't have to walk in, Bee said. We just need to get close enough. If Ivy can hear drones, maybe she can hear the tumblers of a digital lock. Arthur looked at his sleeping daughter. We're going to turn the tables. We're not running anymore. We're going to steal my company back. But in the darkness of the forest, a figure watched them go. A man in a scorched lab coat, half his face covered in burns, limping heavily. Dr. Vance Thorne hadn't died in the collapse. He had crawled out. And now he had a new partner. He picked up a satellite phone. Mr. Crane, Thorne rasped. I found them. And the girl, she's magnificent. The First National Bank of Seattle was a fortress of marble and brass. Arthur, Bee, and Ivy walked in, blending with the crowd. They reached the safety deposit vault, but the master gate required a rolling digital code. My accounts are frozen, Arthur whispered, sweating. I can't bypass this. Bee knelt beside Ivy. Just like the drones, sweetie. Listen to the lock. Ivy closed her eyes, tuning out the bank's chatter. She focused on the electrical hum of the keypad, hearing the tumblers click into place like a song. She reached up and pressed 4 digits. 4198. Click. The gate swung open. Inside box 704 lay the smoking gun. Emails proving Thorne's illegal human trials and financial records of Crane's money laundering. Hand it over, a voice rasped. They turned to see Dr. Vance Thorne blocking the exit, half his face bandaged, a silenced pistol raised. Beside him stood Marcus Crane. The game is over, Arthur, Crane sneered. Give us the girl. She is the prototype. Ivy stepped forward. She didn't cower. She looked at the men who had hunted her and unleashed the sound she had learned to control. It wasn't a scream. It was a focused, high-frequency shockwave. The safety deposit boxes rattled violently. The bulletproof glass partition shattered into thousands of diamonds. Thorne dropped the gun, screaming as his eardrums ruptured from the pressure. Crane fell to his knees, disoriented. The police, summoned by the silent alarm, swarmed the building. 6 months later, the headlines read, Sterling Board indicted, life sentences for Crane and Thorne. Arthur regained his company, but his priorities had changed. He stood beside Bee outside the newly opened Carson Sterling Center for Sonic Therapy. Ivy ran toward them, no longer wearing headphones, finally at peace with the world. The birds, Ivy signed, smiling. They are singing for us. Arthur took Bee's hand. They hadn't just found a cure, they had found a family. The silence was finally broken. What an incredible journey. Ivy and Bee proved that sometimes the things we think are broken are actually our greatest superpowers. If you loved this story of justice and family, hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Would you have risked it all to save Ivy? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss next week's story about a homeless man who found a winning lottery ticket but gave it away. Thanks for watching.